Where Was God? From the Adventures with God series. By Alan Drake. Published by Spirit of Wisdom Publications, Dallas, Texas. Copyright 2023 by Alan Drake. Where Was God?
Early in December 2015, I sat down to watch the film, Where Was God? Stories of Hope After the Storm. I didn't have high expectations for the film, but I was pleasantly surprised, and Where Was God has quickly become one of my favorite films. It's a film about real stories from real people who lived through the tragedy of the tornado in Moore, Oklahoma, on May 20, 2013. The EF5 tornado touched down that day with winds peaking at over 200 miles per hour. It stayed on the ground for about 39 minutes, plowing through 1,100 homes and 2 elementary schools where 7 children were killed. When that monster tornado finally lifted, 24 people were dead and over 200 people were injured. But the devastation was not the real story of the film. It was really about how God demonstrated His love in tangible ways to several families whose lives were impacted by that tornado of May 20, 2013.
Comfort out of loss.
One of the stories that came out of the overwhelming tragedy in Moore, Oklahoma, was that of Kayla Carmona, a 14-year-old girl who traveled with her mother to Oklahoma to help those who had suffered great losses in the tornado. But what could a 14-year-old girl do? It turned out that Kayla was from Joplin, Missouri. Just 2 years earlier, her family had been at church when an EF5 tornado tore through her town and leveled the church building while she was in it. She described how her father shielded his family and others with his own body, bearing the weight of the fallen building for about an hour. When he finally heard that everyone had been pulled out of the rubble, he breathed his last breath, but not before telling his daughter that he loved her. Kayla became a powerful source of strength and comfort for the families of Moore, Oklahoma, as they recovered from the tornado that struck their town. The bond became so strong between the Carmonas and the citizens of Moore that Kayla lives there now, surrounded by the friends who have become as close as family.
Protection amid destruction.
Even as I was watching the film, the message of Where Was God was playing itself out in my own life. I had no idea at the time that God was also using this film to help prepare me for what would come our way in just a few short days. I didn't realize how timely these stories of the Moore tornado would be until the night of December 26, 2015, the day after Christmas, here in Dallas, Texas, where I live. On that night, at least 9 tornadoes touched down around Dallas, causing tragic destruction and loss of life. My brother was hosting a family Christmas party that night. As my mother and I stopped off at a restaurant to pick up food for the party, we could hear the loud storm sirens that were warning of dangerous weather conditions in the area and signaling for people to take cover immediately. At my brother's house, we watched the weather reports on TV as the storm progressed. As reports of the damage came in, the apartment complex in which my nephew lived was named as one location that had suffered severe damage. My nephew was with us, thankfully, when the tornadoes hit, but he left our party early so that he could try to get back to his apartment. 2 days later, when my nephew was finally able to get back to his second-floor apartment, he found everything just as he left it. Even though many other apartments in the same complex had been destroyed, as all of us could see in the news reports, his apartment was untouched. As he described it, even the patio furniture on his balcony had not moved a single inch.
The wake-up call.
And yet, where was God for all of the other people who were affected by the storms that night? According to news reports, 11 people died in those storms. Hundreds of homes were damaged or destroyed. Where was God? When we surveyed the damage after the storms, the one thought that seemed to come to all our minds was that it was a wonder that only 11 people lost their lives in a storm that caused this much devastation. When you see all the homes that were so heavily damaged and think of how many family members lived in those homes, how is it possible that only 11 people lost their lives? And most of those who lost their lives were not in those homes. They were in vehicles that were caught on the road when the tornadoes hit. When you really look, evidence of God's protection is overwhelming amid the devastation, and it began months before the tornadoes struck. In my newsletter on September 30, 2014, more than a year earlier, I wrote this. Quote, "On September 14th, just a few weeks ago, I had a dream in which I saw a record label on an old 45 single that read, 'Little Susie.' I had a sense that this was a theme song. I turned to look at a member of my church who was standing there also. She was crying, or had been crying, and had tears rolling down her cheeks. I don't know her very well in real life, but in the dream I asked her, 'I wonder why this is the theme song.' Then I immediately turned back to look at the record label, and now I could see the full title. It was 'Wake Up Little Susie' by the Everly Brothers. As soon as I saw the full title of the song, I heard the Everly Brothers singing it. My sense was that it was not just a theme song for the dream, but for all of us and the time in which we are all living. We all must wake up. We are living in a very different time that may become much more intense soon in many areas. We may need to prepare and make adjustments to new circumstances that change without much warning." Unquote. I had already begun my own preparations to deal with times of crisis before I had that dream, but because that dream included a member of my church who seemed to be hurt, I felt a responsibility to share this with a leader at my church. I explained to him that I felt the dream was a wake-up call, and that whatever the dream was warning us about could result in church members being personally affected in negative ways, and that I felt we may need to take precautions to prepare appropriately. On January 7, 2015, I met with two of my church leaders to discuss in detail the dream's wake-up call and what might be appropriate ways to respond and prepare. In light of the tornadoes that directly affected members of my church on December 26th, God's care for us was beautifully evident. By giving the wake-up call dream, He gave us months to prepare to respond appropriately to what was coming. Not only that, but by warning us to prepare in advance, He was giving us the opportunity, not only to prepare to care for ourselves and our families, but to be equipped and ready to be on the front lines in a leadership role, caring for others when the crisis came. God does this more often than we realize. When Pharaoh responded appropriately to the warning he was given in his dreams in Genesis chapter 41 in the Bible, and began preparing in earnest for the crisis to come, it positioned him and his country to be in a leadership role unequaled in the world at that time. Over the course of several months leading up to the tornadoes on December 26, 2015, I had time to align myself with organizations that could provide the training and credentials to serve on the front lines, inside the yellow tape, so to speak, in the event of disaster situations. Just after midnight, when the tornadoes struck our area that December night, I started receiving email messages from the Dallas Office of Emergency Management, giving me clear instructions on when and where to report should I be able to respond to help those directly affected by the situation. Because of God's advance warning, I was able to be equipped, prepared, and connected with organizations that already had a plan in place for dealing with the crisis when it happened.
God with us.
Where was God? He was everywhere. So many stories came out after that crisis about people and property that were remarkably protected and preserved amid overwhelming destruction. But even months before, He was there, warning and preparing people like myself to be equipped and ready to care for people when the devastation hit. Looking back, even my newsletter on October 9th of that year was a message of comfort that seemed to anticipate the crisis to come. As I wrote in that newsletter, quote, "But why did this God of love allow Satan to bring such destruction and devastation into the life of Job? Why does he at times allow Satan to bring tragedy and great loss into your life? It will be impossible to understand and reconcile in your mind the thought of a perfect, thoroughly good, loving God allowing such evil into our lives unless you also understand that God is a just God and that He makes recompense available for every unjust loss. If we've done nothing to bring this upon ourselves, why does God ever allow evil into the lives of His children? He doesn't, unless He knows that the temporary injustice that we will experience will allow Him, in His justice, to repay us in ways that far surpass what we had before. Job received twice as much as he had before the tragedy came into his life. You may also be entitled to double or more than what you lost." Unquote. May God bless you with abundant repayment and restoration for the losses that you have suffered.
The Perfect Messenger.
After the tornado in Moore, Oklahoma, ripped through Plaza Towers Elementary School on May 20, 2013, first responders rescued several children and returned them to the safety of their parents. But they also faced the gut-wrenching task of pulling the lifeless bodies of 7 children out of the wreckage of the school. Many of these first responders were themselves parents of young children and could not help but be deeply affected by the experience. About 2 weeks after the tragedy, chaplains from the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team organized a group session and memorial just for the firefighters and other first responders. Many of them came, some of them with very mixed emotions. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a father was taking his little girl to the park for some much-needed playtime. She was a first grader at the Plaza Towers school that had been hit by the tornado. Together they ran up and down in the park and enjoyed time together on the playground. On their way back home, the little girl told her daddy she wanted to go to see the firefighters at the memorial meeting. Daddy wasn't sure that was such a good idea, but his little girl seemed insistent, so they drove over to where the first responders were gathered. When the little girl got out of the car, she skipped playfully into the middle of the somber firefighters' meeting and made her way to the very front. Then she turned around and began looking intently into the faces of the firefighters with her bright, clear eyes. Soon she stopped, looking into the face of one particular firefighter.
"Take off your sunglasses,"
she said. In response, the whole group of firefighters who had been following the little girl's every movement removed their sunglasses. Every eye was filled with tears.
"You're him.
The little first grader exclaimed to the firefighter in front of her.
You're the one who saved me."
For every firefighter gathered that day, amid so much destruction, loss, and grief, God sent the perfect messenger to help them refocus on the positive outcomes and to remind them that what they had done mattered. Their efforts had not been in vain. The reason for them doing what they did was standing right in front of them. So often when tragedy strikes, our first reaction is to blame God, thinking that He sent the tornado of destruction into our lives. The truth, as Elijah learned in 1 Kings chapter 19, is that we often won't find God in the chaotic destruction of the winds, but in the still small voice that comes along sometimes days later to let us know that He was with us when the devastation hit. He's with us now, and He will be with us as we pick up the pieces and move forward. At a time and place in your life when you seem to lose all hope and purpose, God can send the perfect messenger to restore hope and instill renewed purpose in your life. Ask Him.
Thank you for listening to this audiobook. You can find other articles and books by this author at major online retailers. More links to Alan Drake's writings, podcasts, videos, and other media are available on his website at www.spiritofwisdommedia.com.